We have quite a few questions today, so I'll endeavor to do my best. The first question is from Felicia in Singapore. Dear Luang Por, can you please explain the difference between piti, joy, happiness and rapture? Also tranquility, serenity, equanimity and peacefulness all seem to be the same for me. Please, can you help to clear things up? Yeah, in teaching about Buddhism, we have the Pali, the language of the Buddha, and then translations of Pali words which can vary from teacher to teacher, book to book, person to person. The factors of samadhi, they're usually split up into 5. So the first 2 are vitaka vichara, which means initial attention to the object and then sustained attention on the object. And then another factor of samadhi is piti, which is often translated as joy or rapture. And it means the enthusiasm of the mind for the object. Because the object is wholesome, it becomes interesting to the mind, so it becomes enjoyable and we get rapture, and there are different kinds of rapture we experience. Lightness in body and mind, hair standing on end and so on. And rapture can merge into happiness, which is sukha, deep state of contentment and stillness of mind. The last factor of samadhi you didn't mention, but it's one-pointedness or ekaggata. So samadhi is a state of mind that is tranquil or serene, or peaceful. You could use all those descriptions of a mind that is in a state of samadhi, and it has these different factors which we can break down into the component factors of samadhi, but they're all arising in the one mind. But in the course of the practice, you might find at some points in your practice, piti or rapture is strong, happiness is strong, one-pointedness is strong, and with one-pointedness we get equanimity, or upekkha. So all these qualities or characteristics of the mind of samadhi are closely related, but they can be referring to slightly different aspects of the same thing, the same mind. The next question is from Jesslyn in Malaysia. Sadhu Luang Por, grateful for your compassion and the opportunity to ask questions. Luang Por, I contemplated for quite a while if I should register for this retreat, as I have some family duties and responsibilities that I need and like to fulfill on Saturday and Sunday. At the same time, if I missed this retreat, I am not sure when Luang Por will conduct the next one. I should not miss this retreat, so I registered. I would like to ask for Luang Por's forgiveness and permission to take a few hours off on Saturday and Sunday to fulfill my family duties and responsibilities. My mind state and the heart will be more at peace and ease. Well, I give you permission, of course. Family is important, but in terms of practice, it's a chance to contemplate or observe your own attachment to your family and how family responsibilities around Qingming or the weekend, holiday time, these come up. So sometimes it's a little bit of a battle, isn't it, between committing to the Dhamma practice, say joining a retreat, and then family duties, family responsibilities. So sometimes you might have to make a plan in advance and say, okay, this year, because normally I follow my family duties and responsibility, this year, meaning 1 year, could be next year or any year, I'm going to set aside everything and just commit to the Dhamma and see what happens. And you tell everybody and let them know I'll be on retreat, I won't be able to attend the family this, the family that. Sometimes we should try it out as a way to just separate ourselves from family a little bit, so we can reflect on that attachment, what it brings up, and maybe bring some higher wisdom and better qualities of mind back to the family after the retreat. So maybe you can't do that this year, but maybe make a plan to do it in the future. So you can contemplate this attachment and see how to begin accepting the fact that one day you have to separate through old age, sickness and death anyway. So sometimes maybe there's some value in having some retreat time for yourself so that you can then relate back to your family with less attachment and more Dhamma, more wisdom, more peace. But you'll probably have to find the right balance and level for yourself. Like you say, if your attachment is very strong, there'll be lots of worries if you're not there. So sometimes you go back to the family and then return to the retreat. But you have to understand you become peaceful not because of Dhamma, it's probably more because craving is temporarily being satisfied by going back to the family, and then you return to the Dhamma. You're peaceful simply because temporarily you're satisfied, your attachments, your cravings being satisfied, and deep down they're still there, and you may actually be reinforcing it more and more. So that's something to look into. So it was mentioned in the frequently asked questions to reap the most benefit from the retreat. We are encouraged to take the 8 precepts. I know that I will not be able to fulfill the 7th precept as conditions will require a little more communication and interaction during the few hours away from the retreat. During the taking of the precepts, I chanted only to the 1st to the 5th precept. For the 3rd precept, should I follow the 8 precepts chanting of Brahmacharya Veramani, or the 5 precepts chanting of Kamesu Michachara Veramani? Well, you have to decide what level of practice you are undertaking. Like for a retreat, even if you keep just the 5 precepts, I would encourage you to sleep separately from your normal partner, not to have any sexual activity during the retreat. Otherwise, you're kind of, your mind is going to be in too coarse emotional state, I think, to get a lot of benefit from the retreat. So even if you can't keep all the 8 precepts, maybe you're sick, so you eat in the evening, or there may be some aspect of the precepts you can't keep. But I would have thought keeping the 3rd precept, practicing celibacy for a few days is not difficult for most people, and it would mean you benefit a lot more from the retreat. As far as living at home, these issues come up, don't they? Whether you can keep the 8 precepts at home successfully is a challenge. So even if you can't do it yet, I would set it as a goal for some times in your life to try to keep the 8 precepts and experiment. When can you do it? You may begin you may begin with just a 1 day, 1 night period, say. Traditionally, Buddhists might do that on the Uposatha day, the full moon or the new moon day. They undertake the 8 precepts for a day and a night. And you let everyone in your family know that's what you're doing, so they know what to expect. And you set your discipline, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, how you're going to keep the 8 precepts successfully. And if you've done it successfully once at home, then you can do it again, and maybe it can become a regular part of your practice. And through regular practice, they get easier, you become more experienced, and you see the value of the precepts for supporting your meditation. Then to come on a retreat like this becomes quite easy, quite straightforward. So I would experiment with this to see if you can keep the 8 precepts sometimes, but if you can only keep the 5 precepts, well, that's good as well. And try to keep them regularly. And really, as a Buddhist, you should be aiming to try and keep the 5 precepts just as a normal practice in your daily life. That should be your goal. Next question from Santikara in Singapore. Dear Luang Por, how can we practice to reduce our attachments to our family? For example, mother's attachment to children and between husband and wife. Thank you very much. Well, all these issues seem to be coming up at the same time now. So family life, we try and make the 5 precepts the basis for living together in harmony. So that means respecting your relationship, your partner, learning to be mindful of your speech, so practicing right speech, so not telling lies or using abusive speech, not to use aggression or violence to each other, not to harm each other in different ways, trying to keep a peaceful, sober environment in the household is the best way to begin our practice in the family. And then to reflect on impermanence. This is why we chant the chant, separation from everyone I love and like is sure, it's inevitable. We have to separate through death, but sometimes before death, we separate through work commitments, travel. Different things come up in our life, which means we sometimes have temporary periods of separation. And that's something to reflect on. Reflect on the fact that you can't be together all the time necessarily. Causes and conditions can lead us to separate from our family, and it's actually part of life. You can't expect to always get everything the way you want, and that includes family. We have children, as they get older, they go off maybe to uni or go off to work somewhere. Sometimes we don't see them even for many months, even many years. It's a natural part of life. And eventually we must separate through death. So bring that reflection up regularly to help deal with attachment. The word attachment comes from the Pali upadana, clinging, attachment, and it's the cause of suffering. So whatever we attach to, it will lead us to some mental and sometimes even physical, but certainly mental suffering. So what does attachment to a husband or a wife or a child mean? It means that sense of ownership, strong identification with that person as mine, belonging to me, my child, my partner. It's that my that sets up the causes for attachment. Because if anything happens to what you consider to be yours, that you don't like, you don't want, well, you start to suffer. You worry, you fear, you get upset, get annoyed, even get angry. So look at that relationship between attachment and suffering. And we're aiming to develop skillful relations in the family, so relations based on goodwill, compassion, appreciative joy, but also equanimity, upekkha. And the way we deal with attachment in the family is contemplate the fact that everyone in the family has their own karma, good and bad. We've all made good and bad karma, and we're all making good and bad karma every day. And we have to experience the results of that karma. So you might love someone very much, your child, your partner, your parent, but you have to accept they have their own karma and they're receiving the results of their own karma, good and bad. And we can love them and support them and help them, but we can't stop karma from having its effect. It's a natural law of cause and effect. So if our loved ones are doing things that are successful and producing good results and happiness, that's something to appreciate, be happy about for them. But if they unfortunately do things that bring them some suffering and they get caught into suffering, we have to accept that as well. And we can respond with compassion. But where there's attachment, it sort of blinds you to the truth, and we go into despair, don't we? We say, why did this happen to my child? Why did this happen to my parent? This shouldn't happen, this is not right. When in fact it's something that's happened through causes and conditions, and really we have to accept it. But the more equanimity you can have towards your family members, what it means is you can relate to them with Dhamma, with mindfulness, with wisdom. You can remain at peace even if they're suffering. You can learn to deal and help them through their suffering and deal with it from a place of equanimity, balance. When we're attached, we tend to go towards strong emotions, don't we? So we go to sadness or anger or fear. And that doesn't help them or us. You know, any action we do based on anger or fear or worry will tend to be a lesser response to a situation. We make mistakes. We can make things worse through our attachment. So the more we reflect on this, we see that attachment is the cause of suffering. We want to let go of attachment. But it doesn't mean to say you'll let go of your family or your children. It means we're trying to bring up mindfulness and wisdom and relate to them from a place of Dhamma, from mindfulness, from wisdom, from an understanding of karma. And then we can relate to them in a mature way and support them in their practice and encourage them to do good and learn what they need to learn, but also accept when things don't go the way we want, or when problems arise, we can accept that, and we have to. So next question from Shevin. 1. Luang Por, I have a question with regards to the 4th precept. What are some strategies we can use to refrain from lying? Well, undertake the precepts regularly. And you don't need a monk or a ceremony to do that. Just every morning you could undertake to keep the 5 precepts diligently for that day. So that's a mental intention you bring up to refrain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking drink and drugs. And so it's quite a quick establishment of that mental intention to renounce unskillful, unwholesome ways of behavior, and obviously to bring up the wholesome ways of behavior, so kindness, contentment, respect for other people, speech that's based in the truth, honest, and in sobriety. You know, these precepts both involve refraining from unskillful action, but also cultivating, developing skillful action. So with the 4th precept, we're cultivating right speech. So we put effort into developing speech that is kind, honest, useful, purposeful. We can think about the right words to say what we have to say, the right time, the right place to say it. Think about the person you're talking to, what's the best way to address them, and keep our mind with the thought of kindness and compassion for the people we engage in with when we speak. So there's plenty of work to do there, plenty of things to be mindful of, plenty of good qualities to cultivate, plenty of unskillful qualities to let go of. But when you establish your intention to keep the precepts every day, well, that becomes a habit, and after a while you don't need to think about it too much. You have the quality of hiriyottapa in your mind, the sense of shame, fear of wrongdoing is established, and you can't be sure what life will bring you, but as different situations arise, these qualities guard over your mind with the practice of mindfulness, the keeping of the precepts. You know, you're ready for any situation, and it helps lead on to finding skillful solutions to situations using wisdom. So if you're in a situation where you're tempted to lie, you've already undertaken the precept, so that's like you've given yourself a boundary to your behavior. Say, I'm not going to tell a lie, whatever the situation. So then you have to look for another solution to the problem. So if there's some situation would normally lead you to tell a lie, you know, to protect yourself, or maybe to say something to somebody else to protect them or make them feel good or hide the truth in some way, but now you're realizing that's not a good way to go. It leads you to think of another way to solve the problem. So rather than telling a lie, you may stay quiet, or you may talk about something else without telling a lie. You know, talk around the subject, other aspects of the subject. There's other ways to answer that question or solve that problem in each situation. There'll always be another way to deal with it without having to break the precept. So by undertaking the precepts and adhering to them, you're opening up your intelligence, looking for other solutions to the problem, and you're valuing your own peace of mind and preserving your sense of ease. Because if you don't tell lies, you feel at ease. Once you tell a lie, then there's a certain agitation, anxiety there. Will I be found out? What will people think of me when they find out? You can't be completely at ease with yourself when you tell a lie. So you're preserving your peace of mind when you keep the precepts, and that becomes something more and more important to you. Until hopefully it becomes just second nature. You don't tell lies. Doesn't mean to say you always have to tell every detail or bit of information you have in your mind or in your knowledge. Just to stay quiet or reserve what you say or choose your words doesn't mean to say you're lying. It just means you're careful and you're mindful of what you're saying. That's different from lying. So it's a skill, a life skill you're learning, but it supports your practice, your peace of mind, your purity of mind. So it becomes more important to you over time the longer you practice. Next question. Luang Por, does the state of our mind just before death have a huge influence on which realm we will be born in or on our next life? Or is it the good and bad karma we have accumulated over our entire life? Does that have a greater influence on which realm we will be born in? Well, I think both of those points are correct. Like the Buddha talked about consciousness. One moment of consciousness is the immediate cause for the arising of the next moment of consciousness. Consciousness is like a chain of separate moments. It's not one fixed thing in our experience, but it's a chain of moments of consciousness arising, passing away, prompting more moments of consciousness. So literally the last moment of consciousness of your life, this life, will be the cause for what we call the patisanti citta, the rebirth linking consciousness, which kind of the last moment of this life linking into the next life. So it is important, the last moment of our life, the last moment of consciousness. But what will that last moment of consciousness be conditioned by? Well, there's a huge influence. A huge influence on that is going to be what you've said and done, what karma you've made through your life, like you've said, and perhaps there'll be certain kinds of weighty, heavy karma that we made through life, good and bad. So, one of the most powerful kinds of good karma is the practice of meditation. Developing mindfulness, developing insight into the Four Noble Truths, developing the insight that frees your mind from craving, attachment, greed, anger, delusion. That's a very weighty, good karma. So if you practice that through your life, you may not feel you're very successful in your meditation, or you might feel, I haven't attained much. But if you've got into that good habit of watching your mind, letting go of mental defilements, developing patience, mindfulness, goodwill, insight, wisdom, that's going to have a huge influence at the end of your life to keep your mind in a wholesome state as you approach death. If, unfortunately, you've fallen into bad ways and you've made weighty bad karma, well, that will also tend to come up at the end of your life. But if, on balance, you've made more good karma than bad karma, the Buddha pointed out that the bad karma you've made, even if it comes up as a memory or a regret, it may not influence you that much if the overall balance of your mind is towards making good karma. And you can see that in meditation. Many people have done some unfortunate things in their past, like killed animals or told lies or whatever. But as they practice more meditation, develop more mindfulness, their mind becomes steadier, clearer, more peaceful. Their wisdom grows, and they understand, even though they've made mistakes before, they don't have to carry the memory and the regret of those mistakes around. They can let them go and move on, learn from them and move on. So if you've established that pattern through your life, well, at the end of your life, you may have some unpleasant memories arise of, bad relationships with other people or unskillful actions you've done through your life. They may pop up, but they don't disturb you much because the overall tendency of your mind is towards practice, letting go of mental defilements, doing good, spreading metta. If you've practiced that through your life, that's a very invaluable and very powerful kind of good karma that can protect you right through to the last moment of your life. And many people have experienced that. Practicing mindfulness of breathing on their deathbed keeps the mind calm, steady until they lose consciousness. And they may have some bad memories, some good memories, but actually the most powerful karma at that time is the mindfulness they're practicing. And if you've learned that from a younger age, then by the time you get to old age or the time you die, whenever that may be, it's ready. You know what to do. You know where to put your attention. Just now at the monastery, I was talking to a lady who was facing terminal cancer, but success story, she didn't die, she's still with us today as she's had a remission and recovered. But she said, when you get the news that you've got terminal cancer, what do? Every breath becomes important. So you spend a lot of time bringing your mind to pay attention to the breath moment by moment, keeping your mind wholesome, letting go of all your thoughts and expectations on the future, letting go of the past, just keeping the mind in the present moment in a skillful state with mindfulness. She said that became very obvious to her what she had to do. So if you practice the Dhamma through your life, it's the best way to prepare for death. Next question from Chung, I think. Dear Ajahn, Sukhi Hotu, may Ajahn kindly explain the following. 1. Is it right to just watch only one of the bases of mindfulness in our daily chores? If yes, which is better and why? Mind, feelings, body, or thoughts? It depends. I guess with what we call daily life, when you're not sitting cross-legged on a meditation cushion, you're going about your business, you want to practice mindfulness, of course. So where do you begin? Well, the Buddha encouraged us to always come back to our posture, to this body. At each moment through our day, be mindful of what you're doing right now. So you're sitting, to know you're sitting. You're walking, to know you're walking. You're sitting in a car behind the steering wheel, to know that, where you are, what you're doing. Mindfulness is practiced with the quality of sampajanya, clear, all-round knowing, clear understanding. So at any moment in your day, you can establish mindfulness by asking yourself, what am I doing now? What's important right now? I'm driving my car, I'm typing at a computer, I'm eating my food, I'm brushing my teeth, whatever. You establish mindfulness and then clear comprehension of what you're actually doing at any one moment. That's a good starting point. So you come to the body. If it's a very kind of simple or repetitive chore, well, you may even be able to be aware of your breath as you're doing that chore. Or you make the actual movement of your body and the chore, the activity you're doing, the basis for awareness. That's okay. And as you establish mindfulness in the present moment, well, you become aware of what you're thinking. So, just take a very ordinary task like brushing your teeth in the morning or in the evening. You're mindful of the movement of your hand around your mouth, cleaning your teeth. But at that moment, you may also have memories about what you've been doing previously, or you've got expectations and plans about what you're going to do coming up in your mind, and they may bring certain emotional reactions. So you're brushing your teeth and you remember somebody that annoyed you, so you start getting annoyed brushing your teeth. And this happens, and people take it out on their own teeth unconsciously, so they brush with more fury, hurt themselves, stick their toothbrush into the side of their mouth. Or there are many, many cases every year in Australia of people swallowing their toothbrush as they're brushing their teeth. Meaning they lost their mindfulness. Perhaps it was an emotional state, they were too busy, too rushed, or getting angry as they're brushing their teeth, or remembering some unpleasant experience, and down it goes. So they even sometimes have to do surgery on people because their toothbrush has gone down their windpipe and they almost choke to death. Or some people it's gone into the stomach. Life is like that, isn't it? The pressures of trying to get many things done and maybe not being so disciplined or organized, we do often create a lot of stress for ourselves. So part of mindfulness practice is also just paying attention to what's important at that moment, doing that task properly, well, but also being aware of other things, so aware of your precepts, aware of your state of mind, whether it's wholesome or not. Maybe you have to be mindful and just patient if you do have a strong emotional reaction coming up as you're doing a task in your day. Your mindfulness might just say, well, be patient with this feeling, it will pass. So you might develop mindfulness of the impermanence of things. In terms of 4 foundations of mindfulness, you'd say this is mindfulness of Dhamma, or you'd call that anicca sanya, the perception of impermanence. And it requires to be mindful or to remember that at different moments. So you may be getting very stressed about something you're thinking of in the middle of your day, but you may bring up that perception at that moment. You're mindful of yourself, what you're doing, what you're feeling, what you're thinking at that moment, and you say, I'm very upset now remembering this thing that happened, but this emotional state will pass. It's impermanent. And by establishing mindfulness, watching patiently, then you might see it pass away from your mind all there and then. So in the course of our day, there will be many different things we can be mindful of. But come back to your body, the activity you're involved with first, and then try to wisely reflect and understand, what am I doing here? What's important? What's my goal at this time? The reason I mentioned the toothbrush thing is I always remember one lady I saw, obviously was a busy mother with 4 kids in the car, and it was doing the school runs. I was in one car being driven somewhere, and she was going in another car past us. And as she was driving with these 4 kids, she was turning around, telling the kids, not to fight, not to do this, not to do that. And at the same time, she was brushing her teeth and driving the car. And my thought was, this is a mother multitasking, very mindful, but also probably very stressed. And we have that situation arise in our lives, doesn't it? Sometimes we overdo it. We're trying to take on too much because we're not so mindful, thinking many things, doing 2 or 3 different things at the same time, and then unpredictable situations arising with other people all coming in, and sometimes we get very stressed like that. So try to establish mindfulness, what's important, what's safe, what's the task I need to do now, and be patient. If you do have many things to do, you can only do so much in a day. Mindfulness can help you there to remove some of the stresses of heavy workloads or heavy burdens of responsibility. It will definitely help you. Next question, do we practice sati patana in our daily chores or just during our meditation? Well, I've been explaining that a little bit. We carry on outside of our meditation. We do it in meditation, and in meditation you're not taking on other activities, so it's very direct to be mindful of the breath, the posture, or mindful of a meditation theme, reflecting on impermanence, not self, recollecting the Buddha, or so on. We can do our practice more intensely when we're doing sitting and walking meditation, because we've disciplined ourselves to give ourselves that time, and our mental energy is available to completely commit to the practice of sati patana. But when you finish your meditation, the important thing is to try and preserve the mindfulness as you do go off and do other activities. And so we have the precepts as a foundation for that, and then meditation objects that we can turn to through the day, and then mindfulness of tasks. You can make your work, your job of work, the basis for your mindfulness. So if you're doing a job of work, how focused on that job are you? Are you letting your mind wander, getting distracted as you do that job? What thinking you're involved with, maybe you practice directing your thoughts to getting that job completed successfully, doing it well, understanding what the problems and obstacles are, what you need to do for it to become successful, and so on. You can still think, you can still act, but you're making your daily tasks and activities as part of the practice. And that's what we do, and that's what we have to do. And the Buddha encouraged us to practice mindfulness through the day, mindfulness of posture, feelings, our reactions and moods, our thoughts, and so on, and particularly to keep coming back to see the impermanent nature of our thoughts and feelings and memories, see the changing posture of the body, and the reflection on impermanence leads directly on to seeing not self. And you can see any state of mind that arises in the middle of your day, however important or strong the emotion is, or however important the issue is that's bothering you or playing on your mind, if it doesn't last, and you're mindful of the fact that it doesn't last, it changes, you can bring up the reflection, this is not a self, it's a mental state, it's a feeling, it's an emotion, it's a thought, it arises, it passes away. That's a very powerful insight, and you can have that, at work, or eating your meal, or brushing your teeth, whatever. Another question from Menaka. Dear Ajahn, I have a worry when breaking eggs for food, thinking that the egg has got a life in it. Is this an obstacle to developing Dhamma and practice? If it has a life and I break the 5 precepts? Yeah, I'm not sure about this one. Sometimes eggs are fertile and could be hatched, sometimes they're not. But the important thing is your intention. I assume when you're cooking you don't have the intention to kill. And you've bought those eggs simply as a food item to mix. And as far as I know, majority of eggs, they can't be hatched into chicks. But as I say, I'm not fully aware of the science here, the biology here. You may know more than I do. But as far as I know, they're kind of inert. They're not going to be able to become chicks. So it's a bit like buying fish or meat. If that's your preference, your intention is not to kill. You're just buying foodstuffs in a market. You haven't asked anyone to kill. Then you're not really harboring the intention to harm or kill. Then you're not breaking the 5 precepts. If you get information that reveals to you that eggs could become chicks and by using them you're cutting off their life, well, you might decide not to use eggs. You have to investigate that one for yourself. But just keep the intention not to harm, not to kill. I think that's the most important thing here. And in the course of our life, sometimes we do harm things inadvertently, like we sometimes tread on ants or drive our car and a bird bumps into our car or something. But if there's no intention, you're not breaking the precepts. Another question from Doreen. Dear Ajahn, thank you for all the Zoom sessions since the COVID started. They are very beneficial for my practice. May I know when a person embarks on the Dhamma journey with wrong view, how long does it take to fully achieve right view? As it is a gradual journey, is it considered to be the path of Sotapanna, and when 100% right view is achieved, is that person considered to have the fruits of Sotapanna? Does the breaking of 5 precepts become lesser and lesser until finally there is no more breaking of the 5 precepts as a Sotapanna? Or are there other indications that the person is continuously progressing on the path? Thank you. Well, with right view, the Buddha said the main components, causes for right view to arise are 1, hearing the good Dhamma. So listening to Dhamma respectfully, with interest, with an attitude that you want to learn, understand. And then internally reflecting on the Dhamma that you've heard, coming to understand it internally so that you can apply it to your own experience. So number 1 might be learning the difference between wholesome states of mind and unwholesome states of mind. Unwholesome states of mind are to be abandoned and to be prevented from arising. Wholesome states of mind are to be cultivated and maintained and developed. That's a huge part of right view. So getting that established, understanding the Four Noble Truths is essential. So listening to the Dhamma, reflecting on what is dukkha, what is the cause of dukkha, which is craving to be abandoned, understanding that there is an end of dukkha, nirodha, the cessation of dukkha, and that's achieved through cultivating the Eightfold Path. So then you can constantly reflect back on your day, in your life, am I on the Eightfold Path or am I not? Am I developing the causes for more dukkha, or am I abandoning the causes of dukkha? It's a gradual opening up to the truth, but using the Buddha's words and teachings as a framework for reflecting on your experience. So why do we learn to keep the 5 precepts? Well, because they keep us out of trouble. They stop us from creating the causes from suffering. When you kill animals or people, you make a lot of heavy karma that comes back to you. Your mind is not peaceful. Things happen because of the negative karma you've made. The same with stealing or sexual misconduct, lying, drinking. The more you become mindful and reflect on the Dhamma, the more natural it is to keep the 5 precepts. You see, it's the natural, the right way to go in your behavior. They become just part of who you are. And so at some point that's probably established, where you have no more doubts about it. You just know that's the right way to behave. So less and less would you break them, or you wouldn't break them at all. And similarly with right view on the level of wisdom, well, your views will gradually be falling in line with the Dhamma, with the Four Noble Truths, with the law of karma. How quickly that takes place really depends on how much effort you put into your practice, how sincere you are, how committed you are. We all have the capacity and the potential to realize Sotapanna, stream entry, stream winner in this life. But if we don't, well, maybe it's because, like the earlier question, maybe our family commitments take us away. So we're just getting into the retreat, developing mindfulness, reflecting on the Dhamma, and then, we have to go to a family dinner or some kind of activity associated with Qingming. That's the nature of the world. It keeps throwing up obstacles to our practice. And there may be logic and good reasons why we should go to our family dinner or go to our Qingming ceremony. But at the same time, sooner or later one has to start shedding some of one's attachment to the world. Work commitments, family commitments. Practicing the Dhamma doesn't actually harm your family, it only benefits them, but you have to get to the point where you see that. And maybe by developing the Eightfold Path, keeping the precepts, meditating, in the long run you're helping your family more than attending the dinners and ceremonies and all the social functions with family. But you have to get to the point where you really see that and understand that. And it is hard because you're surrounded by a world that doesn't yet appreciate the Four Noble Truths, doesn't yet appreciate the path that leads to the end of suffering. It's not fashionable. It's not fashionable, it's not promoted in our schools, in our society, and it's often looked down on. People who practice the Dhamma are seen as old-fashioned, backward, passive, weak, lost. A lot of derogatory terms are put onto Buddhists because the majority of the world don't yet appreciate the value of it. And you just have to accept that. But as you practice more, you'll have less doubts, less fuzziness in your mind. You're clearer what is good karma, what is bad karma, what is the path leading to the end of the suffering. You understand it more, so even though other people may criticize you or not support you or not realize what you're doing is any use, it doesn't matter. Because you know it's good for you. You know that your mind becomes more peaceful, more clear, happier. You don't doubt. So one of the attributes of a Sotapanna is has no more doubt about what is the path, what is not the path. They have no more doubt in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. They're not questioning the path of practice. They're just developing it more and more. They're not caught up in doubts, uncertainty about what we call silapata baramasa, the blind attachment to rites, rituals, different practices, cultural practices and so on. They know what is supportive of the arising of right view and insight and what is not. They're no longer just kind of hoping that doing a certain practice will bring them to enlightenment. If I do my dana every day and my chanting every day, I'll probably become an arahant. They don't think like that anymore. They're mindful and clear of their actions and the cause and effect in their actions. One thing leads to another, so they have no more fuzziness or doubts about that. So the Sotapanna, they're established in right view. They understand their own body and mind, their five khandhas are impermanent and not self, just like we chanted this morning. They've understood that, so that in their thinking, in the way they relate between mind and body, they know form is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, mental formations are impermanent, sense consciousness is impermanent. But they don't know it just through chanting alone. That's a good start. They know it internally in their heart through developing mindfulness, insight. They just know a feeling arises, pleasant, unpleasant, it's not self. It's not to be grasped at or believed in or identified with as a self. Because they know it arises through causes and conditions. It doesn't have its own essence. It doesn't just exist by itself. Feelings arise according to causes and conditions, then they pass away. The Sotapanna sees that, so they have no more doubts or uncertainty and a lot less suffering than the rest of us. As we know, the Buddha compared the suffering of a Sotapanna to the suffering of the unenlightened person. He scratched his finger on the dirt and said, the amount of dirt under my fingernails and the amount of dirt on the earth, which is greater? The amount of dirt on the earth. Well, in the same way, the amount of suffering for Sotapanna is equivalent to the amount of dirt under the fingernails. They still have a little bit of suffering to experience, but not much. For the unenlightened person, it's equivalent to the earth, maybe many lifetimes of suffering, birth, old age, sickness and suffering, all kinds of problems, money problems, health problems, family problems, all the kind of sufferings of life. They may still have to go through many lifetimes of that. Sotapanna is only 7 lifetimes maximum, so they don't have a lot of suffering to go through. So that's the end of the questions for this session.